Good morning, friends, brothers and sisters. I haven't seen many of you for a long time. I hope you are all doing well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Polly. I am one of the pastors in this church, but I mostly serve in the Cantonese side, so you might not see me very often. Especially during the pandemic, I didn't get much chance to join any of the EC events. I really miss seeing many of you. As we are entering into September, we are also starting off a new preaching series. Our theme for this month is Knowing God, Names of God in the Old Testament series. What is so special about names? On this past Friday morning, my dad has a minor oral surgery procedure at Mount Sinai. So I went with him. As he was having his procedure, I waited in the area working on my laptop. Suddenly, I noticed a mom and a young adult sitting diagonally across from me. I noticed them as I saw the mom keep trying to put a hat on the young man. The hat is with some sort of covering acting as a face shield attached to it. But the young man kept taking it off. He's a young man with special needs. I felt for the mom, so I was trying to think, how can I help? Then an idea came to my mind. So I took up my courage and spoke up, trying to get their attention. I started to make some nice comments about the hat. I seemed to get the young man's attention, and he stopped fighting with his mom on the hat and let his mom put the hat on him. Then I asked him if he could tell me his name. He told me, Andy. So I responded, Hi, Andy. It's nice getting to know you. Suddenly, Andy's face beamed up with joy. Then he kept pointing to the seat next to me that was being taped up, signaling he wants to sit next to me. I told him that I'm sorry, but he couldn't because it's all taped up. But we can still talk, sitting where we were. Then he packed on the chair next to him, which was also taped up, asking me to join him. Andy was overjoyed when he heard that other people addressed him by his name. Name not only helps us to identify people, it is an important step in relationship building. I am sure all of our names are given to us by our parents, grandparents, or even ancestors, except for maybe some of you who might got to pick your own English name. Oftentimes, our given name is given based on our parents, our grandparents, or ancestors' expectations on us. And some of the other names we have, such as our nicknames, usually highlight some traits of our personality, characteristics, or behaviors. So similarly, the names of God in the Bible is not just a mere identifier to distinguish between, say, Paul, Polly, or Pauline, but it also highlights God's characters and attributes. But unlike human names, many of God's names in the Old Testament are not given to God by others, but it is God who himself reveals these names to his people. The 3 names that we are going to look closer into this month, they are all God's revelation. Thus, these names consist of important facts of God that he wants us to know. But by revealing these names to us, to his people, God does not simply want us to know more about him, but as David in Psalm 9, verse 10 says, "And those who know your name put their trust in you." God expects our response as we learn more about him. So I invite all of us, as we learn more about different names of God this month, that we will keep thinking about the reasons God wants to reveal these names to us. And let us not just take it as additional information, but let us humble ourselves and respond to him accordingly. Today, we will take a closer look at the name Yahweh. Yahweh in the original Hebrew Bible, it is written with 4 consonants, YH, WH, reading from right to left. The original pronunciation of this word is actually lost. That is why we see some Bible translations use Yahweh, some use Jehovah. I'm not going to go into the details of the reasons today, but if you're interested, you may look it up later. But they both are referring to the same word. And many Bible scholars believe the original pronunciation should be Yahweh. In our English Bible, however, this word is often being translated as Lord, L-O-R-D, with all capital letters. Yahweh is the only personal name of God which occurs more than 6,500 times in the Old Testament. This certainly is a very important name of God. So if we look at the passage John just read for us today, the name Yahweh actually occurs 4 times here in this passage. In verse 2, verse 4, verse 7, and verse 15. Having learned some of the background, let us now turn to the text for today. In this passage, we see that God reveals his name as Yahweh during his encounter with Moses in the burning bush. After Moses fled away from Egypt for about 40 years, one day, God caught Moses' attention with this extraordinary scene, the burning bush. There is fire within a bush, but the bush is never burnt. Then God called Moses and asked Moses to be his ambassador in delivering his people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Moses was probably shocked from this invitation or commission, so he was trying to understand what kind of qualification he has to be able to fulfill such a task. In his dialogue with God, he asked, if the other Israelites ask who is this God who sent him to deliver them, what can Moses tell them? At first, we may wonder, did Moses not know or not 100% sure who is this God who is talking to him, that he needs to ask for a name to be sure? But likely, it is not the case, as this name of God, Yahweh, has been used before in Genesis. Also, God keeps repeating that he is God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of their forefathers. Wouldn't that be good enough to give Moses and the Israelites knowledge of who this God is? Why Moses seemed to think that this is not enough and he wants more. So what exactly is Moses asking when he asks for God's name? Many believe that instead of just asking for a name, Moses is actually asking what is God's characteristic, what is his character, what is his power, or I'll put it this way, what is his credential, that Moses can tell the Israelites that they can believe him and they are to follow him. So Moses is asking God's significance, characters, quality, reputation, and authority. As to the Israelites, a name can signify one's hopes or expectations for a person. As God repeatedly said he is the God of their forefathers, so we would assume that the Israelites should have some knowledge of God, of his character and reputation. But how come Moses seem to suggest otherwise? Well, maybe we need to look into the context of the Israelites at that time. What conditions are the Israelites under? How is their relationship with this one God they heard of for many years? For the Israelites, not only are they in a foreign country, they are being the lowest of the lowest. They are slaves. They got no respect and they are not honored. Even though God, through Joseph, saved that country from severe famine, now they were forced to work and had to work really hard every day. So maybe for these Israelites, they were really unsure how this one God they heard of, or maybe even the God who they kept calling and asking has anything to do with them. He seemed to be very quiet. He seems to be out of the picture. They probably were questioning. Is there a God? Why were we in such condition? Why did we not experience any of God's goodness and blessings? Are we still His people? So that's probably why Moses asked for God's characters and significance, so that Israelites may listen to him and respond accordingly. Moses is not just asking for a name as label or identifier, but he's asking what's God's character and powers. What Moses needed to know, and probably his expectation of what the Israelites need to know, is what is there in the name of God that will help the Israelites in circumstances like these. And God answered Moses, I am who I am. It seems like God didn't give Moses a name here in verse 14, as Moses expects. From first impression, we might even feel that God was simply trying to cut Moses short. Hey, listen to me, I am in charge here. But if we read verse 15, then we will see that God actually answered Moses' question seriously. If you remember, we said in this passage, Yahweh occurred 4 times, and it did not occur in verse 14, but verse 15. In verse 15, God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, that is Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. God did give Moses a name, Yahweh, and said that this name is his name forever. So this name is constant. This name is not going to change. But then if God already told Moses a name in verse 15, why then did God say something in verse 14? So let us now learn some Hebrew and look closer in the word Yahweh. In the original language, the root of Yahweh is from a verb to be. And Yahweh is basically the verb to be in a third person form. In verse 14, where a lot of the Bible translate the phrase as, I am who I am, the word I am is also from the same roots, the verb to be. But this time, this word is in the first person singular form. And the phrase, I am who I am, basically have 2 of this word, I am, with a conjunction in between that means who, which, or that. This repetition is a common expression in Hebrew to express and emphasize the totality or intensity of an action. A couple examples that we can see that use the same literary technique in the Bible are in Exodus 16:23, when Moses told the Israelites about God's command on Sabbath. They are to observe a day of solemn rest, so that they should bake what you will bake and boil what you would boil the day before Sabbath. And then later on in chapter 33, verse 19, God said to Moses, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. So the phrase, I am who I am, denotes that God's complete and intense mightiness, self-sufficiency, and self-existence. He is not controlled by anyone or dependent on anyone. God is not being created. He is the creator. He is the first being to exist. That also means that nothing can cause him to disappear. I am who I am, however, means more than God's power, his self-sufficiency and self-existence. God is speaking of his relationship to his people. In this scene, one of the central themes is God's presence. God is being with Moses. He is with the Israelites. In here, God is revealing that he is still the same covenant God to the Israelite, to his people. God says, I am who I am. His plans are not dependent on any circumstances or conditions. His promises stand always. His love for his people stays true. No matter when or where, he is there. He is still actively present. That is why in verses 7 and 8, he said that he's seen what they are going through. He heard their cries, their sufferings. Therefore, he is to come down to deliver them. God is determined to deliver his people. Even though the circumstances might have changed, God is assuring them that Yahweh is unchanged. He is eternally constant, and so is his relationship with his covenant people. He is still very concerned about them, who continue to be present with them and continue to be actively involved in their lives. Therefore, I am who I am is God's self-revelation of his character, authority, and also of his covenantal relationship with his people. God is explaining the significance of his name to Moses, but it would be a bit weird and maybe confusing if Moses were to say to the Israelites that I am who I am have sent me to you, so that God taught Moses in verse 15 to call him Yahweh, the verb to be in a third person form, or if you may, he is who he is, or he will be who he will be. Moses is to tell the Israelites that Yahweh is determined to be the faithful covenant God of his people. No matter under what conditions or circumstances, Yahweh is still unchanging. He is still the same God who provides, who saves, who leads the forefathers, and he will do the same for the Israelites now. Yahweh does not just stay in the Old Testament. If you remember, in the beginning of this year, we spent 2 months going through the I Am series in the Gospel of John. Gospel of John recorded 7 I Am statements by Jesus. This I Am is equivalent to I am who I am in Greek. Not only do we see God is our faithful, unchanging covenant God in the Old Testament, also through the birth, death, resurrection of Jesus Christ, he once again showed us he has not forgotten his people, and he continues to invite us to establish this relationship with him. God's ultimate goal is not to show us how powerful he is, how mighty he is by his name, but he wants us to know that he is our covenant God and wants us to enjoy this covenantal relationship with him. That's why in Exodus 3, he is commissioning Moses to deliver the Israelites so that they may worship him. The ultimate goal is not just deliverance, but by deliverance, he is enabling his people to worship him again, to once again aware of this relationship and be able to nurture it. Yahweh said, I am who I am. Today, how do we see God? Do we, like the Israelites, merely looking for power, significance, qualities, or credentials of God to determine whether He is a God worthy of our praise, worthy of our trust? Do we take time to know God's characters and attributes as He reveals to us? Or do we simply pick and choose what we like to believe? Or do we really try to believe or try our best to know Him as who He really is? And the best way to do that is to read the Bible. We need to know who God really is so that we can relate to Him properly. Yeah, maybe you would say, yes, I read my Bible. But let us not just keep reading the few books or the few verses that we love so much, that we probably know how to recite, but forget about all the others. We need to read the whole Bible in its entirety, reading both the New Testament and the Old Testament. Aside from reading the many interesting historical narratives, also to read Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Proverbs, or the prophets. Otherwise, our understanding of God may be skewed. I'm not asking you to finish all this overnight, but we need to have a plan to read through the Bible so that we know God truly. Yahweh said, I am who I am. An invitation for us to trust and to rely on the all-powerful, self-sufficient, and self-existent I am. But do we just seek His blessings in our lives? And mind you, oftentimes, our definition of blessings is very limited. Do we only seek His blessings, but we neglect the blesser, neglect His invitation to a covenant relationship with Him? Are we aware of God's constant invitation in our lives, reminding us of His faithfulness, of His love, of His presence? God is always patiently waiting for us to respond and let Him to be part of our lives. Today, what is blocking us to respond and believe and trust Him? Is it our circumstances or conditions that is not what we expect, and we were clouded with anxieties, uncertainties, fears, insecurities, that we also, like the Israelites, started to doubt God's power, God's existence, God's presence, God's love for us? Because of our seemingly unfavorable condition, are we starting to think that God is no longer with us? God does not care. And we start drawing away from Him instead of drawing closer to Him. Sometimes the circumstances or condition we are in may make us feel that God is not around, God is far away, such as the current COVID situation that seems to have no end. Reports of assaults due to racism and hatred we see, we hear every day around the world. Things are disappointing. At times, it might make us feel that God is not with us. God is no longer the God who has our best interests in mind, or God is not the mighty God we once knowed of. But Yahweh reminds us, I am who I am. He is constant. He never changes. He's not limited by anything, so that we can continue to trust Him and to rely on Him and experience His presence no matter where we are. Today, what is shaking our faith to believe that He is still the same covenant God, being with us, watching over us, and actively involved in our life? Maybe it's not from the outside, but from the inside. Maybe it's our own I am, our emotions, our expectations, our seemingly sovereignty, our false claim to self-sufficiency. But let us be clear, only God is the only one who is truly I am who I am. Yet He reveals His name to us, Yahweh, and gives us hope when we believe and trust in Him. Someone has said it very beautifully. Our only hope is to abandon claims of our own sovereignty and sufficiency and cast ourselves upon the mercy of I Am. May God help us and guide us today so that we may have the hope and joy with Him.